Hey, Anya. Hey, Nikki. Hey, Avery. Hey, Nisa. Time to make the coffee. Yay, Saturday! Today is Zoe's birthday party, actually. After this, that's where we're going. It is Miss Zoe's birthday party. Coffee cheers indeed. She turned 4 years old this week, and today she is having a rainbow unicorn birthday party. It's very exciting. Rainbows and unicorns with a Y. Yeah, her name is spelled with a Y, as she should, yes. She requested a rainbow unicorn birthday party. Morning, Song. Yes, she did. That was her own request. Her parents didn't know she was having a rainbow unicorn birthday party until I asked her, what kind of birthday party are you having? And she said, rainbow unicorn. And they were like, well, we better get on that. We didn't know. That's weird. It was very funny. Morning, Amanda. How's everyone doing? How is everybody today? Oh, excuse my yawns. Excuse my yawns. How old is she? She's 4. Yeah, she just turned 4 on the 2nd. They didn't want to have her party on the Tuesday before 4th of July, so they waited till the Saturday. But she just turned 4. Big 4. Her brother is 1, and he is talking up a storm. Yesterday, he blew kisses to his puppy and was saying goodbye to him in the car when they had to leave. It was so cute. Oh yes, it's so Grace Love. She has always had preferences, to be fair. Last year, she had a pink versus blue party. Actually, we made slime as party favors for her birthday. Yes, she's had a lot of slime, Brie, but her party favors this year are called unicorn lemonade. I have a picture. I'm going to post them, and they come with rainbow sprinkles and a lemon charm, and each of them get a Rory sticker that is our birthday mascot, because Rory is a unicorn dinosaur, so it was already fitting the theme. So I was like, well, this is perfect. Yeah, me too, Brie. But her brother, who's only 1, yesterday he was in the car and he was going, and his mom goes, what are you doing, honey? And he goes, bye, Gadget. And that's their dog. He was blowing kisses to his dog to say goodbye to him. I was like, you're so cute. What is happening? My heart just exploded when I saw that video. It was so cute. And she saw him in the back seat just blowing kisses, and we weren't driving, so she just stopped and started recording it. I know. Now he's like, I can't believe he's 1 already. I know. He was like, bye, Gadget, bye-bye. Every kid wants to go to her birthday party. They get awesome slime favors. That's right, Nikki, that's right. Social clout from my niece and nephew, that's for sure. They're gonna get a lot of social, but yeah, he's very in love with his dog and wanted to blow him kisses goodbye. And I said, you know what? I think that is a perfect little empathetic little boy. We love a little boy who likes animals and is kind to them. That is it's a good sign, right? You know what I mean? You want the kids to be kind to the animals. That's always good. I remember your videos with Catherine while she was so pregnant. I know, she was so pregnant, and now he's already 1, and she's like a normal human again. It's wild times. Wild times. Bye, Gadget. Bye-bye. And Catherine told me the other day, she said, you know, I have great news. He doesn't wake up in the middle of the night crying anymore, which is so nice for us. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is so nice for you. And she says, I also have bad news. And I was like, oh, what's the bad news? And she said, the bad news is now he wakes up in the middle of the night to practice talking. So over the baby monitor, now we hear things like, Dada, please, Dada. And I was like, that's pretty funny. He just wants to talk now. He's like, hello, Dada, bye-bye. And I was like, well, it's better than crying. And she was like, yeah, but it's a little creepy. And I was like, okay. But you know, second kids, they always pick things up more quickly because they have the first kid to copy, right? He has Zoe to copy, so he's picking it up. It's way cuter than crying. Hello, Dada, bye-bye. He doesn't have a lot of words yet, but he's very strong on the words he does have. He can say up when he wants to go up. He can say mama and dada, hello, bye-bye, all that stuff. You guys want to see the wrapping paper I got for Zoe's present? Look at this adorable unicorn wrapping paper that I got her. Isn't that just like the cutest thing? I wrapped her present in this. Too cute. Too cute. Too cute. I got it at Target. If anyone has a niece and they need unicorn paper, that's where you can get unicorn paper. I'm glad to be finally home and back for book club. You had your baby? Well, congratulations, Maddie. What flavor is it? That's a lot of words for a 1-year-old. I know, he's so fast. He's so smart, Avery. Like, that's the thing with this kid. Like, he's really alert. I know, nice. I love it too. I can't get Thunderstruck ACD out of my head because that's funny. There are worse things to have stuck in your head. Maddie, what flavor of baby did you have? And how are you feeling? You need to teach him anti-Sasha. No, that's right, I do. That's right. Yet. Becca, are you in here? I didn't even see you join. He loves me, don't get me wrong, but you know who he loves the most? My husband, who to him is uncle blah blah blah, but we won't say that. I'm feeling good, lowering my blood pressure after delivery. That's fair. He loves my husband more than anyone else. Like, when the grandparents are always fighting over who gets to hold him, my sister said it's not a competition between the grandparents, it's you guys against him, and points at my husband, because Ethan loves him more than he loves anyone. He only wants him to hold him. He loves him so much. It's so funny. He absolutely adores him. They're best buds. They just chill. He only wants Uncle's secret husband. He hangs out with him. He sits with him. He chills with him. He goes on the swings with him, does the whole thing. It's just him. I'm like, but what about me? I love you so much. And then I kiss his cheeks like a crazy aunt, and he goes, did you see what she did to me? And crawls right back over to him. I'm like, okay, well, I love you. And he's like, that's great. You're embarrassing. And I'm like, oh, great. Okay. Yep. It's so cute. Oh yeah, no, they're best buds. They're best buds. Zoe loves him also, especially because he does, you know, puts her on his shoulders, and he's so tall. It's true. If he's in the vicinity, Ethan only wants to be with him. He knows. He knows. Oh yes, it's true. He loves him. All right, are we ready to go to the Alchemy Institute today, you guys? This is a little scary. I think that the Temple of Knowledge might be there. I think Bristol could be right, but we don't really know. We don't really know anything. We didn't even know that they were going to show up. We are on chapter 7 today. You get to love him from a distance. Exactly, yeah, it's true. It's true. But as soon as he's old enough to play with slime, I think he's going to think I'm pretty freaking cool, you know? I mean, like, once he figures out, oh, she brings the party favors for the birthdays. Hey, Liz. He's going to be pretty excited, right? He's going to be like, yes, My friends will get to play with slime at my birthday party if Aunt Sasha comes. That's true, Naisa, unless he wants to be an artist, and then I stay in the sad zone. Sad. Oh, for sure, once you can play with slime, he's all your yeah. I know, Liz, I know. We're happy to have you. Chapter 7, things are going to get intense. Hey, Brittany, long time no see you either. All right, let's get into it. We're going to the Alchemy Institute today, you guys. This is going to be intense, but let's go. At 4:55 that afternoon, the fairies and witches were standing on the front steps of the academy, eagerly waiting for the transportation to the Alchemy Institute. Bristol had asked Emerald and Tangerina to help her represent the fairies at the Conference of Kings. After hours of constant begging and bribing, Stitches and Sprout had finally convinced Lucy, against her better judgment, to take them as her guests. So the Academy of Magic was left in the hands of Skylene, Bibi, Pip, and Mrs. V. The fairies and witches' full attention was on the hedge barrier surrounding the fairy territory. At any moment, they knew their ride to the Institute would appear, and although they didn't know what to expect, not only were they curious about what was coming, they had no idea how it would get inside the property. 2 additional walls of emerald and fire had been added to the border as an extra precaution against the army of the dead, so entering the grounds was not an easy task. Did Dr. States say how we're getting there? Tangerina asked. Yeah, he didn't mention that part, Lucy said. Did he say where the Alchemy Institute is? Tangerina asked. No, he didn't mention that part either, Lucy said. For a man of science, he was really pretty vague about the details. So let me get this straight, Tangerina said. A complete stranger showed up out of nowhere, tells you that Xanthos has become a danger to the planet, and then he invites us to an undisclosed location for a conference that may or may not threaten Xanthos' life, and none of you asked any questions? The fairies and the witches shrugged with guilt. It had been kind of a long morning, Lucy said. Well, I don't care where it is or how we get there. I'm just excited to go, Sprout said. I visited preschools and grade schools and middle schools and high schools and beauty schools and trade schools and performing arts schools and academies and colleges and universities and grad schools. But this will be my very first institute. It won't be my first time around scientists, Stitches said proudly. I'm what they call a case study. Emerald checked the emerald sundial around her wrist. Well, it's 5 o'clock on the dot, she said. Where are they? As 5 o'clock turned to 5:01, the fairies and the witches began to worry that there had been a miscommunication. However, the Academy of Magic was suddenly shaded by a quick eclipse, and the girls realized that they had been looking in the wrong direction. The fairies and the witches gazed up and saw a floating carriage descending from the clouds at a rapid pace. The carriage was bronze, with a large balloon attached to its roof, and it was pulled through the sky by 4 enormous birds. Hey, Des. As the carriage swooped lower and lower to the ground, the fairies and the witches gasped. The birds weren't living animals, they were machines. Instead of feathers, the birds were covered in small pieces of scrap metal. Instead of having muscles or ligaments, they moved thanks to a series of gears turning inside their hollow bodies. Big golden keys stuck straight out of their backs like they were large wind-up toys. The carriage landed on the ground, ripping chunks of grass on impact, and the mechanical birds waddled through the Academy's front steps. The coach was also operated by a number of turning gears and cogs, and when the carriage came to a complete stop, the doors opened on their own and chimed the announcement of their arrival. The fairies and witches' mouths were agape as they observed the strange vehicle. What the heck is this? Lucy asked. I guess this is alchemy, Bristol said. Is alchemy safe? Tangerina asked. Well, it got here in one piece, Esmeralda said with a shrug. I want to ride on one of the birds, Stitches said. Me too, Sprout said. The witches ran to the carriage and hopped on the back of 2 of the mechanical birds at the very front. Meanwhile, Bristol, Lucy, Esmeralda, and Tangerine sat themselves inside the coach.
Once they were seated, the doors closed behind them and another chime announced the carriage departure. The mechanical birds raced forward and then glided back into the sky. The takeoff was much more jarring than the fairies had expected, and they were almost thrown out of their seats. Stitches and Sprout cackled with excitement as they urged the birds to go faster. Soon the carriage was so high that the Academy of Magic disappeared below them. The birds flew south over the sparkling ocean and soared into a sea of fluffy white clouds. The farther they traveled, the more inquisitive the fairies became about their destination. Even after an hour into the flight, there was no land in sight. All they could see outside their windows were clouds and ocean, and the birds never changed course once. "Where is this thing taking us? The South Pole?" Tangerina asked. "I didn't realize there was anything this far south," Bristol said. "Yeah, well, the Alchemy Institute must be on a deserted island or something," Lucy said. Emeralda gulped. "Guess again," she said, and pointed ahead. Everyone turned to the front window and their mouths dropped open again. Perched on top of the clouds on the horizon was what looked like a small city. The city was made of gold, silver, and bronze buildings that bobbed up and down as the clouds drifted through the sky. The buildings were connected by a floating path that continuously grew or shrank depending on how far the wind blew the structures apart. As the carriage flew closer, the fairies and the witches noticed that the buildings all resembled scientific tools. There were domes and roofs that looked like test tubes and flasks, and towers that were shaped like giant telescopes and microscopes, and spires and poles that were equipped with spinning weather vanes and animators. Dozens of exhaust pipes let out fire, smoke, and steam, while several cranes and conveyor belts moved the materials to and from different laboratories. And in the very center of the institute, placed on top of the tallest building, was a gigantic golden armillary sphere, clearly a proud symbol of the institute's grand ingenuity. The fairies and the witches were speechless as the carriage descended toward the Alchemy Institute's breathtaking campus. Bristol couldn't tell if she was more shocked that such a place even existed or regretful that she hadn't seen it until now. "It's remarkable," she said with wide eyes. "Absolutely remarkable." "Yeah, well, now I get why all the alchemists are so secretive," Lucy said. "If I lived in a place like this, I wouldn't want visitors messing it up either." The carriage dived towards a long landing strip at the very front of the campus, and the vehicle came to a bumpy stop. As the fairies and witches stepped out of the coach and climbed off the birds, they saw Dr. States waiting on the landing strip. He was accompanied by 12 other alchemists who stood in a tight row behind him. "Welcome to the Alchemy Institute," Dr. States said. "I hope you had a pleasant flight." There was so much to look at, the alchemist's friendly greeting was almost ignored. "Dr. States, this place is incredible," Bristol said breathlessly. "I've lived here since I was a child, and it really never gets old," Dr. States said, and then he turned to the alchemists behind him. "Allow me to introduce my colleagues. This is Dr. Strand, the head of biology, Dr. Steam, the head of chemistry, Dr. Stats, the head of mathematics, Dr. Stent, the head of physiology, Dr. Straight, the head of geography, Dr. Starr, the head of astronomy, Dr. Stump, the head of botany, Dr. Storm, the head of meteorology, Dr. Stage, the head of anthropology, Dr. Stone, the head of geology, Dr. Stagg, the head of zoology, and last but not least, Dr. Sting, the head of entomology." All the alchemists were dressed in long robes and pointed caps made from gold, silver, and bronze fabrics. The only exception was Dr. Sting, the head of entomology, who wore a hornet's nest on his head with actual hornets buzzing around it. And just like Dr. States, the other alchemists' wardrobes were embroidered with symbols and equations pertaining to their respective sciences. But I don't know, you said those there to leave. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he's even there. This is better than an audiobook. Oh, thank you, Brix. That's so sweet of you to say. Thank you. I appreciate that. Unlike Dr. States, the majority of his colleagues were very young and very attractive men, and some of them looked just a few years older than Bristol. Dr. Straight, the head of geography, was the only young woman among the alchemists. Her short silver hair matched her robe, and she wore tiny compasses as earrings. After one glance at his hornets, Tangerina was immediately smitten with Dr. Sting. She strolled directly to the young alchemist's side with a playful bounce in her step. "Oh, why, hello there, kind sir," she said. "I'm Tangerina Turkin. That's Miss Tangerina Turkin." She batted her eyes and offered Dr. Sting her hand. The alchemist was so fascinated by the bees flying in and out of her orange hair that he didn't even notice the gesture. "I've never seen an oosocial colony residing in a human's hair before," Dr. Sting said. "May I take one of your bees for examination?" Perhaps you could take me to lunch first, she said with a flirty wink. Emeralda cleared her throat. Tangerina, remember what we're here for, she said. Speaking of, where are the other representatives? Bristol asked. Oh, well, you're the first to arrive, Dr. State said. I'm guessing the others weren't as keen to board our mechanical carriages as you are. Human precautions can be so inconvenient when there's a schedule to follow. I imagine we'll have to kill some time while we wait for them to join us. Would you ladies like a tour of the Institute in the meantime? Absolutely, Stitches exclaimed. I thought you'd never ask, Sprout said. The fairies and witches followed the alchemists up the winding path toward the campus. As they went, they passed through a giant gear that rotated around the path like a spinning arch. The gear was engraved with a welcoming message. It said, "The Alchemy Institute, where exceptional innovation meets extraordinary imagination." For the first stop on the tour, Dr. States led the fairies and the witches into a bronze building at the center of the campus. The entrance was engraved with the formula E equals MC squared, and opened into a very tall room with 4 white walls and no windows. As soon as the fairies and the witches stepped inside, they had to constantly duck and dive from several colorful objects hurling through the air. Thousands of bright red balls bounced from wall to wall, and hundreds of yellow yo-yos repeatedly dropped from the high ceiling and then rolled back upwards. Tons of small paper clips were compelled from corner to corner by different size magnets. As Dr. States walked through the room, he miraculously avoided colliding with any of the moving objects, as if he were protected by a magical shield. The alchemist tapped his cane on the floor, and all the balls and yo-yos and paper clips froze in place. This is the physics department where we study the laws of motion, Dr. States said. Whether through gravity, propulsion, or magnetic charges, understanding why and how something moves is one of the most fundamental principles of science. Besides all the colorful objects, the room was also filled with a very peculiar team of workers. A dozen short people with wide rectangular heads wandered around the department taking notes and making measurements of the frozen balls and yo-yos and paper clips. However, just like the birds that pulled the floating carriage, these workers were made entirely of metal. They moved around the department thanks to the gears spinning inside their hollow torsos and the springs under their feet. Are those people? Bristol asked in awe. We call them magbots, short for magic robots, Dr. States explained. The magbots are a perfect example of alchemy at its finest. With some of the complex engineering and a dash of magic, we've created the perfect assistants to help us conduct our research. The magbots are motivated entirely by work, and they don't require food, sleep to function, just a little oil and a light polish every now and then. You'll see many of them working throughout the Institute. The alchemist tapped his cane on the floor, and the balls and yo-yos and paper clips started whizzing around the room once again. After their tour of the physics department, Dr. Steam led the fairies and the witches into the chemistry department next door. The department was covered in long glass tubes that stretched and looped and zigzagged through the spacious laboratory. The girls became dizzy as they watched vibrant gases and chemicals moving through the tubes at different speeds. The floor was tiled, and each square was labeled with a different abbreviation, like HE, TI, or CA. The girls noticed that the tiles contained different liquids, solids, or gases below their feet. What's inside each tile? Emeralda asked. Oh, each tile holds an element of the periodic table, Dr. Steam said. Think of elements as small bricks, and everything in the known universe, from the oxygen we breathe to the rocks at the bottom of the ocean, is made from a combination of these bricks. Oh, what's that pretty one? Tangerina asked. She pointed to an element that was more like a sparkle than a solid or a liquid or a gas. That's MA. It stands for magic, Dr. Steam said. Magic is an element? Bristol asked. The alchemist nodded. It's unlike any other element. In the periodic table, its atoms aren't made from traditional electrons, protons, or neutrons, but from a particle we call magtron. The magtrons can turn into as many electrons, protons, and neutrons as they wish, meaning MA can transform into any element it wants. We find MA in the blood of magical people and animals, but so far we haven't been able to recreate it. Ah, man, Lucy said, it's just like talent. Next, the fairies and the witches were given a tour of the biology department. The girls were surprised to see that the department was like a giant prison. 3 stories of prison cells were trapped around a massive microscope, and each of the cells contained a very ugly and very odd-shaped creature. Some of the creatures were round and squishy, others had tails and wiggled, and thousands of wiggly hairs. "Is this a monster jail?" Stitches asked with a hopeful smile. It's a containment facility for magically magnified microorganisms, Dr. Strand said. "Could you simplify that?" Sprout asked. "Cells for cells," he clarified. "It's much easier to examine microorganisms when they aren't so micro. So we make them a little bit bigger with magic, and most of these cells, well, are human. Some of them are animal, but we also have a few troublemakers like the viruses and the bacteria." A purple microorganism that looked like a giant sea urchin started growling at Lucy. "Yeah, what kind of microorganism is that?" she asked. "Oh, that's Carol. It's the common cold," Dr. Strand said. "Stay away from her. She bites." After the biology department, Dr. Sting gave the girls a tour of the etymology department. 4 of the 5 walls contained colonies of ants, bees, termites, and wasps. The 5th wall was a giant canvas with thousands of exotic insects pinned to it. But as the girls took a closer look, they realized that the bugs weren't actually pinned. They had just been trained to sit incredibly still. The rafters were covered in cobwebs and home to thousands of spider species. Sounds like my nightmare. I won't be visiting this one. No. Horrific. If there's anyone we want to lock up, it's the spiders. Sorry. A million moths flew across a large lantern and illuminated the department like a fluttering chandelier. In the middle of the department, a massive magnifying glass was used as a table, and Dr. Sting invited the fairies and the witches to each pull up a chair. "Most people are creeped out by our insects, but they're essential to our survival," Dr. Sting said. "Without bees and butterflies, there would be nothing to pollinate the plants. Without earthworms and centipedes, there would be nothing to aerate the soil. And without predators like dragonflies and spiders, the earth would be, well, overrun with pests. And no, Amy and Tina, oh goodness, Amy and Tina are fighting again. Just excuse me." The alchemist quickly scooped up the queen ant and the queen termite that had escaped their colonies. "Do all your bugs have names?" Tangerina asked. "Yes, every single one of them," Dr. Sting was proud to report. "And they all have different hobbies and personalities." Yeah, at least he knows they're gross, right? The alchemist retrieved a handful of bugs from the canvas and he held them beneath a giant magnifying glass for the girls to see. Ugh, nasty. "This is Lori the ladybug. She loves romance novels. This is Gary the grasshopper. He's obsessed with gambling. This is Betty the dung beetle, and she has raging OCD. This is Derek the daddy longlegs, and he's an excellent tap dancer. And this is Mandy the mantis. She's very conservative. Just don't mention politics around." Smack! Emeralda suddenly slapped a mosquito that had landed on the side of her neck. Dr. Sting's eyes went wide with horror. "That was Mitchell," he exclaimed. He was almost finished with medical school." "Oops," Emeralda said as she wiped his remains off of her. "Sorry, Mitchell." After the fairies and the witches were kicked out of the etymology department, Dr. Stagg escorted them to zoology department. The department was a gigantic aviary, but not just for birds, for every animal the girls had ever heard of. Eagles soared above artificial trees, monkeys swung on artificial vines, lions prowled through the artificial fields, and elephants bathed themselves in the artificial streams. Okay, when you humanize bugs, how are we supposed to hate them? I know, I think that was the point, Hanya. Chris does this to us. He takes things that we normally don't like and he's like, "Here, love it a little." And we're like, "I hate you a little bit," right? I hate it just. There were also enormous aquariums that were big enough to hold a blue whale and a gigantic squid. And the natural enemies exchanged dirty looks from opposite sides of the department. The department was also home to the animals the girls didn't recognize. They saw a wolf walking upright like a human, a dolphin running on 4 legs as it chased after a stick, and a tiger with opposable thumbs that slowly, very slowly, climbed a tree. While we take great pride in studying pre-existing species, magic has also allowed us to create hybrid species of our own, Dr. Stagg said. Here we have a bear wolf, and over there's a dogfin, and over here is a slothger. A slothger? Stitches asked. Yes, he's very dangerous, but he's really too lazy to care about it, Dr. Stagg said. That's funny. It's funny. How do we prevent animals from preying on other animals? Bristol asked. Oh, that's simple. We just keep the animals fed and they don't attack each other. Funny, we do the same thing with Lucy, Tangerina quipped. Hey, Lucy said. When the girls were finished looking around the zoology department, Dr. Stump led them to the path of a massive 5-story greenhouse. The botany department contained every single plant imaginable, from the vegetables that Bristol had used to grow in her family's garden to snapping Venus flytraps that the fairies had seen in Greenhouse Canyon. The magbots watered and pruned the plants, but strangely, they also played violins, pianos, and tubas for the plants too. Right? Seriously, how many people do we know like that? I wish we knew more like that and less of the other direction, right? Why are the magbots playing instruments? Bristol asked. Well, we've discovered that plants grow quicker and stronger when they're exposed to classical music, Dr. Stump explained. In the corner of the greenhouse, one of the magbots stood on a small stage reciting jokes into a bullhorn. Knock, knock, he said in a lifeless, monotone voice. Who's there? The other magbots responded. A little orchid. A little orchid who? I had no idea you could yodel. Ha ha. Ha ha. The magbots' lifeless laughter echoed through the greenhouse, and the fairies and witches winced at the terrible pun. Yeah, what's up with all the bad jokes? Lucy asked. We've also discovered that some plants thrive on bad stand-up comedy. That explains Mrs. V's really healthy vegetable garden, Emeralda said. The fairies and the witches left the botany department as quickly as they could, and Dr. Stent escorted them to a 9-story building that was shaped like a person. The path spiraled around the physiology department as they entered it from the top of the building, or rather, through its mouth. Once they were inside, the fairies and the witches were shocked to see the interior of the department was an anatomically correct replica of the human body. They boarded a small boat that sailed down the building's throat and through its digestive system like a piece of food. As they floated through the department, Dr. Stent pointed out the different body parts around them. Here we have a gallbladder, and above us is the liver, behind us are the kidneys, and just ahead is the pancreas, Dr. Stent said. Each body part is actually a room dedicated to studying that particular organ, muscle, or gland. And now everyone hang on, we're about to enter the large intestine, and it's a windy ride. Can't wait to see how this ride ends, if you know what I mean, Stitches said with an eager grin. Please let it be a gift shop, Tangerina whispered to the others. As they continued their tour of the Alchemy Institute, the fairies and witches each found the department more wondrous than the last. The meteorology department was located in a tower with thermometers built into every door and a roof shaped like a massive umbrella. A different type of storm was contained in each of the tower's floors. As the magbots monitored the weather patterns, the poor robots were tossed around by powerful tornadoes. They were drenched by tropical hurricanes, and they were frozen by an icy blizzard or executed by lightning. Inside the mathematics department, dozens of magbots sat at desks computing equations by hand and swiping the beads on counting frames. The walls were made of chalkboards, and every inch of them was covered by endless equations that Dr. Stats referred to as pi. The equations started as 3.14159265 and continued for thousands and thousands of digits. A floating piece of chalk kept adding numbers to the end, and as the equation grew, the chalkboard walls magically grew with it. The anthropology department was an enormous cave that was covered in handprints and artwork from ancient times. The department also displayed several fossils that had been magically reanimated. Talking skulls told magbots everything about when and where they came from. Trilobites struggled to free themselves from the stones that they were trapped in. Prehistoric tools rebuilt prehistoric structures from rubble. Skeletons of cavemen battled skeletons of dinosaurs and woolly mammoths, while the magbots took notes on their interaction. The geography department was laid out like a formal ballroom. It had curtains made from maps and flags and glimmering chandeliers made from large compasses and grand staircases made out of stacks of atlases. A beautiful silver globe was positioned in the very center of the department. As different locations were pinned with a magical pin, the spacious floor rose and sunk to create a miniature model of each different location's terrain. However, the most astonishing part of the tour was what the fairies and witches learned in the astrology department. The department was under a humongous dome and equipped with 6-story golden telescope. Magic holograms of distant planets and stars and galaxies drifted through the air around all of them. The holograms were so realistic that the girls used each other as a shield to protect themselves from the unexpected comet and meteor showers. There are 8 different planets orbiting our star, over 100,000 million stars in our galaxy, and an estimated 120 billion galaxies in our universe, Dr. Star enthusiastically told the girls. That means there could be more than 700 quintillion planets out there, some just like our own. Are you saying that there could be life on another planet? Emerald asked. Not just other planets, Dr. Star said, although we can't prove it. Evidence suggests that there are an infinite number of multiverses and dimensions, too. The idea gave Bristol goosebumps, but she wasn't altogether surprised. It reminded her of a visit to a gray field between life and the great unknown. Even a number of quintillion seemed too small to describe all the planets, stars, and galaxies that she had seen there. There were too many for one universe to hold. Wow, other dimensions, she said to herself. Now that's something I'd love to see. After astronomy, Dr. Stone took them to the geology department, but unfortunately this was the final stop on the tour, and it was the most disappointing. The geology department was a narrow room with a couple piles of rocks, and only a couple piles of rocks. Well, this is underwhelming, Lucy said. Is something gonna happen here? Tangerine asked. Not all science can be entertaining, Dr. Stone said. In fact, some might say geology is between a rock and a hard place. The alchemist slapped his knee and howled with laughter. Get it? Because geology is literally a rock and a hard place. The fairies and the witches collectively sighed at that bad joke. Okay, I thought rocks were a tough crowd, Dr. Stone said, and then he laughed again at his own joke. Are you sure botany isn't your calling? Emeralda asked. Thankfully, the fairies and witches were saved from the alchemist's questionable humor when a chime rang through the entire institute. The fairies and the witches didn't know what the chime meant, but all the alchemists went outside. Everyone looked toward the front of the institute, and in the distance, they could see more floating carriages were arriving to the institute. Splendid! The other representatives are starting to arrive, Dr. State said. Ladies, please excuse us while we greet our guests. Dr. Stone, would you kindly escort the fairies and the witches to the conference chamber? We'll begin the Conference of Kings once everyone is here. Dr. States and the alchemists headed for the landing strip, and Dr. Stone led the girls toward the center of the campus. As they walked, Lucy pulled Bristol aside for a private word. So what do you think? Lucy whispered. Is this the Temple of Knowledge? I'm not sure, Bristol whispered back. On the one hand, there certainly is a lot of knowledge here, but on the other hand, it doesn't really fit the parts of the legend. Like, there were no unlikely warriors protecting it, and all the other departments were so easy to get into. Maybe the legend is just false advertising to keep people away, Lucy suggested. Okay, I guess that's possible, Bristol said. If everything goes well at the conference, I'm going to ask Dr. Straight if she's ever heard of the Temple of Knowledge before. You think that she'll give you an honest answer? Lucy asked. No, probably not, but I can usually tell when someone's lying to me, Bristol said. If she doesn't give us the information voluntarily, then we'll just have to sneak into the geography department after the conference and find it ourselves. Well, the fairies and the witches made their way to the conference chambers. The floating carriages started to land, and the emerging passengers caught the girls' attention. The first to arrive was King White from the Northern Kingdom, and the fairies instantly recognized him from his black hair and rugged good looks. Even though King White had been on the throne for more than 2 years, he still chose to wear the uniform of a knight. The next arrival was King Warworth from the Western Kingdom. An obnoxiously feathered hat covered his bald head, and his mustache had become so bushy that it covered his entire mouth. Both King White and King Warworth brought 2 armed knights as their guests. The kings were followed by Queen Industria from the Eastern Kingdom. She was an elderly queen who wore a gown made from metallic fabric, a tribute to her kingdom's most prized export, and her white hair was styled underneath a silver headdress that resembled the jaws of a wrench. Her face was pale and wrinkled, and she walked slowly with the help of a cane. Queen Industria had brought a knight and her granddaughter, Princess Proxima, as her guests. The princess wore a dress and hairstyle very similar to that of her grandmother's, and even though there were several decades between them, they shared a very strong family resemblance. The fourth arrival was the Goblin Elder and leader of the Goblin Territory. Goblins were known for their glossy green skin and pointed ears and sharp nails, and this Goblin Elder was no exception. He traveled with 2 Goblin warriors, 1 male, 1 female, and the female Goblin was about 7 feet tall, very muscular. She had messy pink hair, wore armor, and breastplates made from hubcaps, and she carried a tall staff. Shortly after the goblins arrived, the 5th carriage touched down and the troll chief stepped outside. The leader of the troll territory also traveled with 2 guards for his protection. The trolls were harder to tell apart than the goblins were. All 3 of them were short and hairy with big noses, big teeth, and big feet and tiny horns. The 6th carriage landed at the Institute and King Elvin, the leader of the elf territory, emerged. Unlike the other elves who were traditionally small and slender, the royal family were tall and broad-shouldered. The king had long dark hair and he wore a wide crown made from tree branches and black and white checkered suit. Unfortunately, the elves were infamous for their poor tailoring, and the king's sleeves and pant legs were asymmetrical. King Elvin only traveled with 1 guest, his son, Prince Elron. The prince was the spitting image of his father, but wore a much smaller crown made of sticks. Next, the fairies were thrilled to see that Emeralda's adoptive father, Mr. Slate, had been chosen to represent the dwarves. Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, goblins, David Bowie, it's a whole thing. He arrived from the 7th carriage with 2 dwarfs from his mind. It looked like all 3 had just gotten off work because they were covered in dirt and all 3 wielded pickaxes. The 8th carriage landed immediately after the dwarfs and brought a single ogre to the Institute. The ogre could barely fit inside the coach and had trouble squeezing out of the door. He was about 9 feet tall and had brown, bumpy skin. His large nose was pierced with a bone. The ogre was the only representative the fairies had never met before. He seemed just as confused as they were about why he was there. Just like the fairies and witches, all the representatives were speechless as they took their first sight of the Alchemy Institute. They stood motionless, their eyes darting from department to department, and they didn't even notice their peers standing beside them. Bristol was relieved to see all the leaders together. Although they had differences in the past, especially with the trolls and the goblins, the fairies were on good terms with these representatives. In fact, Bristol was the reason the elves, trolls, goblins, and dwarves even had territories to call their own. She was confident that the Conference of Kings would go smoothly and that they would come to a conclusion that putting Xanthos' life in jeopardy wasn't worth it. Unfortunately, Bristol quickly realized her relief was premature when a 9th carriage appeared in the sky. The carriage landed on the strip beside the others, and the door was kicked open before the vehicle even came to a stop. To the fairies' and the witches' dismay, the righteous emperor stepped out and was joined by his high commander and the largest skeleton from the army of the dead. "What is he doing here?" Lucy shouted. "He was invited, just like the rest of you," Dr. Stone told them. "How could you invite him?" Emeralda asked. "He's a monster." "Regardless of his cruel tactics, the righteous emperor is still the leader of the South," Dr. Stone said. "The main objective of the Conference of Kings is diplomacy, and it wouldn't be very diplomatic to exclude someone just because we disagree with them." Unlike the other leaders, Seven gazed at the Institute the same way he looked at everything, as if it was something to conquer. Just the sight of his smug face made Bristol's blood boil. "I have a feeling this conference is going to be anything but diplomatic," she said. Well, that was fun. I think the Institute is fun. I think the conference is going to be harsh. That's my opinion. We ended on 148. If anyone is putting this into Goodreads, if you guys aren't connected with me on Goodreads, I keep a log of all the books we read for book club in a book club folder. So you can always add me on there. I'm Sasha Quinn, just like on my book. on Goodreads, and I keep a folder of all of our book club stuff as we read them, so you can always do that. Institute was big fun, conference big scary. Yes, correct. Institute was big fun, conference I imagine will be big scary. Yes. What's Goodreads? Goodreads is an app / website, Brie. It's like social media for books. What's the audiobook app that you use? I use two. I mostly use Libby, which is a library app, so they're all free. But if there's anything that's not available on Libby, I go over and get it on Audible. But I really like getting stuff on Libby because it's free and you're supporting libraries. Unfortunately, I gotta go because today is Zoe's birthday party, so I gotta go get showered and ready for Zoe's birthday party. But we'll read about the conference on Monday. Thank you all for hanging out, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Libby is great. Yes, I do too, Brie. I love that. You can track and log your books and friend people and reviews. That's right. Yes. I post reviews for all the books that I read there, and I have a folder specifically just for book club as well. And that's the whole kit and caboodle. So have a great rest of your day, y'all. I will see you on Monday, and go read or something. I don't know. Enjoy.